One of the smallest archetypes of champions in League, yet one of the most feared, is Reset Champions, a subgroup of individuals with the ability to spiral out of control if they so much as get even one kill. Reset mechanics are a dime a dozen in this day and age, to many of our dismays. In every game, you're bound to find at least one champion among the 10 with a clause in their kit that states if a takedown is scored on an enemy champion, this ability's cooldown gets reset, or something to that effect. Typically, a champion contains only one reset mechanic, which means even if they're able to escape or continue the attack, the enemy team has a bit of leg room in responding to them before they get to continue their assault. But what happens when a champion's entire kit gets reset all at once? That question's been responsible for the controversial reputation that Katarina has, a champion legendarily feared and hated due to her extreme volatility by the very nature of how she's meant to be played. Having a long-standing history from her conceptualization even as more and more overloaded champions came out, notably in the assassin category, few, if any, project the same kind of pressure that she can merely by existing. Curiously, however, Katarina is actually one of the least prominent assassins in the game if we go by win rate. As well, the balance team actively takes measures to ensure she doesn't get to enjoy any newfound success for more than a patch or two. So for today's episode of Everything Wrong With, we'll be investigating why that's the case. As a member of the original 40 champions in the game, Katarina was actually the only true assassin at the time. True, we had Evelynn, Kassadin, and I believe Shaco, but when you contextualize their old kits, they were a lot more ambiguous in whether or not you can call them genuine assassins. You could have interpreted Evelynn and Kassadin as skirmishers, meanwhile Shaco has always struck me as a hit-and-run type champion and less of a get in your face and blow you up instantly. Of course, it depends on what build and playstyle he's going. Essentially, by definition of an assassin being an evasive, front-loaded burst, high-risk, high-reward champion, Katarina was the only one among the original 40 at launch, which might be why longtime players think of her when the word assassin comes to mind. She was basically the only one, and though she did receive a mid-scope update during the class reworks, her identity has remained the exact same. She scores a kill then completely f***s the enemy team in the blink of an eye. This shouldn't sound unfamiliar to any of you. Multiple characters have the self-same ability to get one person, then move on to the next, and then move on to the next. That's kind of the whole shtick of the Slayer archetype. So why is this so much more rage-inducing when she does it? That's because Katarina is the only champion in the game who has both complete resetting and immediate resetting. To Riot's credit over the past few years, while they certainly became more cavalier in regards to frequency of giving champions resets, they had the decency for some consideration towards global counterplay. When you look at other notorious champions like Viego, Master Yi, and Bel'Veth who similarly possess a get me a reset and I 1v9, they do offer a moment's reprieve before they truly get back up to 100%. Bel'Veth and Viego both have to click on something and then go through an animation of some kind before they can press on with the attack. Likewise, Master Yi's Highlander passive refunds only 70% of his ability's cooldowns, 70% current cooldown to be exact, meaning under all circumstances there will always be at least a couple seconds before they can use the rest of their stuff. It may not look like it, but there is some measure of delay. Most other reset mechanics are typically attached to mobility tools like Samira's Wild Rush, Pyke's Death from Below, or Akshan's Heroic Swing. Annoying to deal with, yes, but on their own they don't pose an immediate threat to one's own life in most cases. Samira in particular, despite looking like she can press her ultimate on demand every kill, has to rebuild her style stacks all over again upon using Inferno Trigger. Why am I making such a big deal talking about other champions than the subject of whom this entire video is based on? It's to emphasize a point that for all the BS we associate reset mechanics with, justifiably so, they're not full immediate restorations of a champion's pressure. You either have time, however short, to prepare for an imminent attack, or they only get a small detail of their combo back. The only champion who bypasses all of those restrictions is Katarina. She's the only champion out of the 170 in the game who has a full, unconditional reset of basically her entire kit, with Death Lotus needing 3 or more takedowns to fully reset, assuming no ability haste. It's why she developed a reputation for being the face roll champion prior to her mid-scope update. You could literally mash Q, W, and E from one target to another, and that was her entire combo. Regardless of what order the abilities came out as, you would apply full strength and pressure. Following her mid-scope, Katarina is no longer a face roll champion as you now need to catch her daggers and teleport either to them or to your target, but the premise remains identical. She clears one, quickly moves on to the next. In spite of the fixed delay of her Q and W, Katarina is uncontestedly the fastest pentakill-oriented champion in the game, faster than Darius, Master Yi, Samira, Viego, Bel'Veth, Jinx, what have you, with the only exception being Pyke if everyone coincidentally happens to be at kill percent. How this presents a source of irritation for players is that more often than not, they have little to no time to react to Katarina teleporting all over the place and 100 to 0ing multiple people at the same time. Even if they're preemptively expecting it, they might lack the physical means of doing anything about it. What's a Xerath or Nami or Aatrox or Lee Sin or Anivia supposed to do against a Katarina who can blink 5 times in 2 seconds? Not much, not unless one of them manages to land any form of hard CC on her. The amusing thing is that Katarina also happens to be the only pentakiller who lacks a single form of defense outside of her mobility. No untargetability, no projectile destruction, no stealth, not even damage mitigation, making her totally vulnerable to any method of response. But just for the sheer fact that she can instantaneously move from one person to the next makes people feel much worse against her, even if the likes of Viego or Akshan might statistically be more threatening in a similar situation. For that matter, pentakillers are typically distinguished for specifically going after one target at a time. Thanks to her daggers and trademark ultimate, Katarina not only has instantaneous resets, but she can also potentially wipe out your entire team simultaneously. She has that same fear factor, no pun intended, as super ultimate champs like Fiddlesticks and Kennen, only it's on a hypermobile assassin who requires virtually no prior setup, giving her the edge over Samira, who's more of a backloaded champion in that department. People will naturally carry strong opinions against any champion who can one-shot them, so when taking into account her ability to start a fight at maximum pressure at the drop of a hat, reset the cooldowns of her basic abilities the instant someone she touches dies, and have the capacity to wipe out the entire enemy team all at once makes her the most dangerous champion in the game on paper, since no one else has all 3 of those attributes except her. At the same time, Katarina herself has to play constantly on edge because of how easy it is for her to get smacked over by collateral damage. I'm not exaggerating when I say she's arguably the most vulnerable assassin in the game. She might be the most dangerous champion in the game, but it's counterbalanced by herself being exposed to equal danger, resulting in Katarina being both the hardest assassin to play around, yet also the easiest. A byproduct of her being constantly exposed to counterattack during her own sequence is that she ends up occasionally being perceived more like a diver than an actual assassin. Part of what deems a champion to belong to the assassin class is how difficult they are to hit. Technically yes, clever usage of Shunpo can allow cat players to appear extremely elusive, but its value is nowhere near as guaranteed as the likes of untargetability and stealth. In essence, Katarina is the most punishable assassin in the game, but in return she's also the best assassin at punishing you. If say the Lulu is careless enough to exhaust her wild growth and polymorph on someone else, that's a green light for Katarina to go in and tear everyone to shreds. Conversely, if Katarina were to engage early and Malphite happens to be waiting nearby to ult you, then you basically become worthless. You're literally dancing on the edge of 2 different outcomes, 1v9 pentakill or a glorified cannon minion. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Just like Master Yi, where a single difference in action separates a pentakill from being the first one to die contributing 0 DPS. But then why do people take less issue to Master Yi compared to Cat? In addition to what I said earlier with respect to her unique properties, 2 other aspects make her snowballing potential both significantly higher and significantly lower depending on how you look at it. First and foremost, how easy it is for her to go from 0 to hero just like that. We all heard this before. She goes 0-2 in lane and is down 40 CS, and you as the mid laner did a bang up job making the first 10 minutes of her life a living hell. She then decides to take a field trip down to bot lane while you recall to buy items and meander back to mid lane.
Enemy triple kill.
Ah, the all too familiar sound. Katarina's ability to manifest a triple kill out of nowhere isn't as brainless as people say it is, but she can and often does find those opportunities, notably when piloted by someone who knows how to play her at a high level. She can exploit even the slightest moment of carelessness and take it much further than most other champions. In contrast, the Viego, Bel'Veth, or Master Yi might only be able to score 1 or 2 free kills on average. In other words, you can do everything right as Katarina's lane opponent, but God forbid your team does something wrong. A skilled Katarina player gets that much more from those mistakes, leading to you oftentimes facing her when she's significantly fed and therefore having a stat advantage against you on top of her other things. Secondly, her attack angles. Thanks to her open-ended mobility through her dagger and passive resets, Katarina has a lot of ways to approach a fight, whereas other champions, even her fellow assassins, may only have a couple ways to get in. True, it might be easier to see her coming or prepare for where she can attack from compared to a Talon Zed or Echo, but once the fight breaks out, they have to approach it a certain way. Katarina, on the other hand, can choose to play head-on 5v5 and deal as much damage as possible through her Death Lotus, or she can attempt to pick people off one by one. It's kind of like rock, paper, scissors with her. If you're right, you're extremely right and she's the most irrelevant assassin in the game. If you're wrong, you're extremely wrong and she's the most powerful assassin in the game. Against most other champions, a mistake realistically affects the person who made it and perhaps anyone in the immediate vicinity, but for Katarina, mistakes affect the entire team since every takedown exponentially widens her threat radius. This dynamic is why trying to balance her can be frustratingly difficult. A champion who simultaneously can make it feel like it's impossible to shut her down and way too easy to shut her down. Further exacerbating how extreme she feels to play against is that she's also a very black and white champion when it comes to counterplay. On one hand, you have champions who literally cannot do anything against her no matter what, and on the other hand, you have champions that can literally be first timed and shut her down no matter what. Certain team compositions, when played at a passing grade level, can prevent Katarina from accomplishing anything, whereas another assassin like Akali or Evelynn might still have a way in. They tried to alleviate that for Katarina by giving her more freedom to build. Prior, her one-dimensionality was also tied to her item selection in that it was mostly AP, but then following the Assassin update in 2016 they made it so picking up daggers, her Shanpo and her Dead Lotus applied on-hit effects, as well as granting said daggers an AD ratio. Now Kat has access to magic and physical damage items and the utility that comes with them. However, in doing so, it opened up a whole new can of worms. Katarina can apply on-hit effects more quickly than even AD carries, allowing her to rapidly stack up items like Terminus and Kraken Slayer while taking advantage of anything else like Blade of the Ruined King and Wit's End. Combine that with her being a manaless champion, and while her front-loaded DPS does take a hit, she becomes an incredibly effective bruiser, dealing equal parts physical and magic damage. Access to tank shredding high DPS items like Bork and Terminus make her surprisingly good at 1v1ing and breaking through enemy frontline, creating even more opportunities for her to project the image of a 1v9 assassin that one-shots your entire team and can never get caught. Should any attempts be made to team build or itemize against her, the Katarina player could in response adjust her strategy and counter-purchase in a cat-and-mouse-like fashion, effectively making it impossible for you to deal with her by any means other than team composition. The concessions given to her typically have to get backpedaled on very quickly though, because if there's ever a champion who takes a mile with every inch, it's her. Like with most 1v9 champions, the balance team has to cautiously navigate where and how they buff them, as the margin for error for these types of cast members is demonstrably thin. Anything that remotely makes it easier for Katarina to reach her strongest point, by extension making it harder for you to stop her from doing so, will lead to more of those inflammatory moments of her 1v9ing the game. Her AD builds in particular were especially troublesome for players, being statistically the more successful of the two due to on-hit items being gated by their backloaded pressure, and on those who tend to build them only working on a single target. Yet Katarina has the ability to apply their effects in a front-loaded manner through her multiple on-hit effects, and more crucially apply them against multiple enemies. AoE on-hit effects are exceptionally rare in this game, so Riot tends to make them very strong to account for them being limited to mostly one person. But if you were to compare, say, Katarina's Blade of the Ruined King damage to a Master Yi or Yasuo's Blade of the Ruined King, she's usually significantly higher to them. By extension, she can abuse other on-hit effects like Titanic Hydra on multiple targets. As a result, they had to constantly nerf the AD and on-hit aspects of her throughout the years because they realized just how broken it is for her to apply these effects to everyone around her. On the other end though, if they give her too much AP ratios, her front-loaded damage gets too high, which has the same issue of giving people less time to react to her, and she's already really hard to react to in the first place. Because she's constantly exposed and therefore likely to get interrupted or counterplayed more than other assassins, Katarina has a higher maximum than champions with more guaranteed pressure. The reason attacks like Death Lotus, Crow Storm, and Bullet Time have base damage and or ratios potentially in the thousands is for the simple reason that how often does someone face tank the full duration of that attack? Extremely rare. That's why skill shots or delayed attacks have more strength than immediate ones to proportionalize the reward factor associated with them. But since in the late game Katarina can use Death Lotus potentially twice, she very often can get the equivalent of a full ultimate's channel worth of damage, hence why it feels like she destroys the enemy team seemingly regardless of whether it's a tank or a squishy. That being said, her ultimate still needs to have really high ratios to account for the possibility of her ultimate also doing no damage. It's a never-ending balance between making her feel good enough to make players feel like they're getting a satisfactory result without being at the detriment of other players' abilities to do the same with their champion. Unlike other members of her class though, whose more straightforward range of pressure can be easier to contain, Katarina's profile of abilities makes her one of the most difficult champions to get just right. We have plenty of feast or famine, broken or useless champs in the game, but no one epitomizes that more than her. You can have one person bitching about Katarina being the weakest champion in the game, and at the same time another person can be bitching about Katarina being impossible to play against. But regardless of what faction you belong to, one thing's for certain, she can be stressful as hell to deal with. It doesn't matter if she's 0-5, a single well-played fight and a triple kill can be all she needs to become public enemy number 1, just like that. Anyway, that concludes everything wrong with Katarina. Let me know your thoughts on her in the comments down below, whether you agree or disagree with my points, or if you feel like I missed anything. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Everything Wrong with videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.